I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you enjoyed listening to the audio. And as always, I appreciate all the love and support. And trust me when I say, it literally means the world to me. Afternoon about 4 years ago, inside my house, 3 helmeted figures appeared out of light gray mist next to my kitchen. All wore helmets and loose spaceship-like suits, all with greenish glow. What struck me most about all 3 were big googles each wore inside of their helmets. 2 appeared to be using probes to take samples from my house walls, floors, and kitchen items. The third one, which acted like their leader, saw me looking, came towards me, got in my face, and mentally, angrily communicated. It said something to me, and I replied both verbally and mentally, "Yes, I can." At which point, that humanoid appeared to be having a temper tantrum and, again, "You can't see me. You're not one of us." While the above might seem strange or unbelievable to you, it's actually affirmation for me about this encounter in my childhood, which I'll briefly relate. I was maybe 4 years old. We lived in a rural and old couple across the street raised a few chickens. They liked me and let me visit and help feed the chickens at times, and candle eggs. One day, I just went over to see the chickens and saw several humanoid figures, wearing goggles, suits, helmets, all appeared green in color. Most had syringes, using to take samples from chickens, the ground, the wooden coop, trees, and looking beyond, I saw more of them in my neighbor's orchard. One helmeted figure saw me looking and came over and telepathically told me, "You can see me. You must be one of us." And tone of communication was welcoming and happy. He shared more about them and communicated what they were doing, but that was beyond me as a small child. In both encounters, I could actually sense how they were as creatures. The humanoids to me were clearly male and mammal-like. At least, that's how they felt. Over the years, I've had encounters with humanoids and other temporal and paranormal creatures to include reptilian. The following mysterious incident was related to me in September of 2001 by a well-known Liverpool comedian whom I cannot identify. He stipulated that he would only relate the full facts of the bizarre and scary tale if I would give him my word that I would never identify him. I shall, therefore, have to call the comedian Bob. In the early 1990s, Bob drove up the M62 to Manchester, where he was due to perform a comedy routine as part of a cabaret show. As usual, Bob's performance was very warmly received by the audience, and in appreciation, he decided to go back on stage for a further 20 minutes. While he was performing his additional material, he noticed a beautiful looking woman of about 25 or 30 years of age sitting at a table. She was smiling at Bob, and she reminded him of the 70s film actress, Farrah Fawcett Majors. After he had finished his comedy act and had basked in the audience's enthusiastic applause, Bob went backstage and changed. Then the manager of the club escorted him to a specially reserved table for a meal and a drink, just before the next performer took to the stage. Bob made his way over to the table where the woman was sitting alone and asked her if she would care to join him. The woman smiled and accepted without any hesitation. She was very tall and looked even more attractive at close quarters. She had sapphire blue eyes and long blonde hair. In a soft voice, she said, "My name's Danielle." Her accent was not a local one, but was difficult to place. Bob ordered champagne and was soon flirting with Danielle. The woman, however, refused the champagne and preferred to sip mineral water. There was a stay behind at the club, and it was not long before Bob and Danielle were dancing slowly, tightly embracing each other. He learned that the reason Danielle was on her own was that her boyfriend had arranged to meet her at the club, but that had not turned up for some reason. She told him that she lived in St. Helens, and Bob said that, as she had not been drinking, she could drive home to Maryside in his car. Danielle was not keen, and instead preferred that Bob stay overnight at her home until he was fit enough to drive in the morning. At 3 a.m., Bob and Danielle left the club in Manchester and walked through the chilly night air towards the club car park. Danielle shivered in her sleeveless top, so Bob gave her his leather jacket. Danielle had to strap Bob's seatbelt on for him because he was so intoxicated. Minutes later, the couple embarked on the return journey down the M62. During the journey, Bob fumbled for the controls of the car radio, but Daniel's hand intercepted his, and so the couple sat in silence as the car sped along the motorway. Suddenly stirring from his alcohol-induced doze, Bob turned to look at Danielle and saw something that still gives him nightmares to this very day. The girl's beautiful features had contorted into what can only be described as a demonic scowl. Her head swiveled towards him, and her eyes turned blood red, and her mouth opened wide, twice as wide as a normal mouth, to reveal a fearsome array of pointed teeth. The comedian instantly became sober, but felt faint and breathless with the shock. The girl sitting in the driving seat of his car must be some sort of supernatural entity and was driving him goodness knows where, as if it was going to be able to read his mind. The thing in the driving seat screamed with manic laughter and suicidally zigzagged between the lanes of the motorway. Bob was not a religious man, but he suddenly found himself imploring. The car screeched into a 180-degree turn and slid off the hard shoulder onto a slip road, then veered into a ditch. Bob opened the door and tried to get out, but in his blind panic, he forgot to unlock his seatbelt. He cried out desperately for help and looked back in terror at the seat behind him. It was empty, except for his leather jacket. There was no trace of the fiend who had been masquerading as a woman. The police found Bob wandering along the hard shoulder of the M62, and he gabbled out his bizarre tale, but was not believed. The police checked the club, and the management confirmed that Bob had left with the woman that had been driving him home. Not one person at the club had any idea who Danielle really was. Bob was badly shaken by this spine-chilling incident and has never appeared at the Manchester club since. Okay, so a few years ago, back in 2014, I came across something that I had never seen before, and still to this day, I have no idea what it was. I remember that day as if it were yesterday. It was summer, and the evening was hot and sticky. My best friend Kay and I were on our way to Winchester, Ohio. She had been dating a boy and they ended up breaking up like a few days before. We were going to his house to exchange property, and I was there to make sure everything went smoothly. After we did the exchange of property, we headed back to my town of Hillsboro. Winchester was like an hour or so away, so it was getting dark. We were on the back roads, listening to music and just jamming out. We were, what I am assuming, halfway home. When we were coming over a hill, night had fallen. On the left side of the car was long grass, like it was super long, like taller than me. As we reached the top of the hill, we saw a black figure come out of the long grass. As we first thought it was some random animal since we were in the middle of nowhere. But as we got closer, we realized that it wasn't. The figure was on all fours and crawled on its hands and knees. I know that if I had stood up to it, it would have been at least 6'4", maybe even taller. When our headlights hit it, we got a better look and it turned its head and looked at us. It was completely black and shiny, looking like it was dipped in tar. Its eyes were round and milky white. Its mouth were full of sharp teeth. I remember my blood ran cold, and Kay asked me what that was, but I didn't know. She asked me what should we do. I had a strange feeling that if we stopped the car, something bad was going to happen. So I told her to floor it and don't stop. As we got closer, it turned around and went back into the long grass. We haven't spoken about it since. Ever since I saw it, I've been trying to rack my brain trying to figure out what it was. I have done research and have come up with nothing, and just thinking about it sends chills down my spine. Does anyone ever hear or has seen a creature like this? It was mid-November of 2021, and me and about 10 friends were camping in the woods in the Sawtooth National Forest, near Petite Lake. There were 2 groups of 4 people in 2 tents, and one in a car, and me and my buddy were in hammocks near the edge of the camp. It's about 1 a.m., and we all had been sleeping for about 2 hours. I wake up to my hammock mate, panting extremely heavily and yelling my name. I am confused, so I get up and help him. He is paralyzed by fear. He said that he had an extremely vivid dream that there was a black figure, tall and slender, trying to break into his car after he had seen this figure decapitate me and the rest of his friends. He said that he woke up to the figure near the car and saw all of our heads stuck on sticks throughout the camp. He proceeded. He said to click the car alarm button, and the figure began to run circles around the car, and then stopped, then dashed off extremely quick into the woods. I was obviously freaked out at this point, and I immediately felt very uneasy. But I told him it was just a bad dream, and that he needs to go back to sleep. Him and I tried for about 5 minutes, both stricken with fear at this point, when we hear our friend in the tent begin to yell. This freaked me out and my buddy out quite a bit because we had no idea what was going on. We were also very vulnerable in our hammock by ourselves. Our buddy's yells proceed to wake up most of the camp, and we find out that our friend in the car that my buddy said that clicked the car alarm was awake. So all of us were scared and awake, and we're having a conversation about what was going on, and the buddy in the car says that he heard scratching on the window and heard something pull at the door. He also said that he had seen the black figure running around the car as well. We were all freaked out at this point and decided to move into the same tent. Our friend with the dream also claimed a similar murder story to the friend in the hammock. The next morning, we all talked, and so many of us experienced what happened that night. 6 in total that we determined that it must have been some sort of being that was giving us nightmares. We called it Wendigo, but we have no idea. Also, we had friends that stayed at the same site about 6 months earlier, and a few of them did notice weird things happening at camp at night, like feelings of being watched or feelings of a being walking around their tent. Back in 2013, my cousin and I had an encounter with Bigfoot. So me and my cousin were both 18 at the time. We just finished our last year in high school, and we were on our end of the holidays, and we both had no idea on what we were going to do on our break. My cousin suggested that we go spend a week up in the coast with one of our grandfathers. Now, before I move on, we live in a small inn town called Gisborne, 40,000 people in population, and the coast is pretty much the rural area near my town, all bush and forest pretty much. And our family has a homestead in a small settlement called Waipiro Bay. Our grandfather was happy. We were there to spend some time with him. I was happy just to be there too. Just something about being in the bush just relaxes and clears my mind. Anyway, after a long day of hearing sheep and cutting up wood, our grandfather told us that we should go spotlighting for eels for our dinner. We waited till around 8 p.m. and then we went off. Now my grandfather's house is on this hill, and right below it, at the back of his house, is this trail that leads to a creek trail. The creek trail is about an hour walk, and the sides are fully covered in thick brush. Unfortunately, the eels were too small to catch. We get to the end of the trail and turn back the way we came. As we were walking back, we started to hear these weird squeals coming from the left side of the bushes. So we stopped, turned out our torches, and just listened. In my mind, I thought it was just a wild boar running around, and my cousin said the same thing as well. We turned our torches back on and carried on through the creek. About 5 minutes later, we can hear the squeals again, but this time they were louder and closer, and something was rubbishing through the bushes. We stopped, turned our torches off, and just listened again. We both faced where the noise was coming from, and we could see this black silhouette staring at us. My cousin reached to turn his headlamp on, and there he was, staring right at us. His face covered in thick black grayish hair, orange yellowish bright eyes, teeth like a canine, hands as big as my head. He looked at us and let out this big huff and stepped back into the bushes, and off he went. Me and my cousin both just looked at each other. It lets this sigh of relief out and carried on back to the house. We never said word on our way back, just silence. We get back to the house, and grandfather says, "No luck on the eels?" And my cousin replies, "I think we just saw Bigfoot." My grandfather looks at us and says, "Yeah, I've seen him around here a few times as well. I just leave him be." I was shocked when he said that. It was like, "Wait, you've seen him too?" My grandfather says, "Yeah, I've seen him when I'm just out hunting. He's come to the house a few times, but he doesn't come close, so I don't do anything about it." So I just let him be around, and also told us he didn't want us to go out and look for him either. But my grandfather believes that Bigfoot is some ancient guardian that watches over the local forest near him. I'm 28 now, and I still think about this at night sometimes. The only other person I've told this story to is my partner. She believed me. She's also had some pretty weird encounters / experiences before we met, and that's exactly why she believes me. I walked from the front door to about halfway down the driveway. I began to dump out the mop water into the grass. There was no one and nothing around me as I approached the driveway. And even if someone was coming my way, I would have been able to see or hear them in advance. I remember this fact vividly because I would often check the bushes visually when outside at night, since we had issues with a few chubby raccoons living in the bushes next to our house who would always steal the cat food, and my mom would leave out for the strays she fed. As I'm dumping the mop water out, I feel that sensation you feel when someone is standing right next to you, like the feeling you get when someone moves their arm past your arm or walks too close to you. The air moves a little bit, and you were aware of another presence in your vicinity, and I saw some sort of movement in my peripheral vision. So I look up to my side, towards the street, expecting to see a raccoon or something usual like that. Instead, I saw a very tall humanoid shape bending down and reaching out towards me. It had no face, and it was darker than black. I don't know how to explain how dark it was. It was like Vanta black. I remember dropping the mop bucket, gasping in surprise and backing up a few steps in shock and screaming. Once it saw that I had noticed, it instantly turned around and ran down the driveway and then ran out of the beams of the driveway lights down the street. Its arms and fingers were incredibly long, and its legs were almost smoky or blurry as it ran. I say ran because it moved so incredibly fast, and it's like its legs were a foggy blur. It moved so fast. I honestly didn't even have time to react beside the initial steps backwards before it turned around and ran down the street and disappeared. I was so confused and shocked. I froze. My mind was blank and it was silent. I was too scared to move for a few seconds, and I just stood there like an idiot. My mind was blank because I was trying to process what the fuck I just saw and trying to rationalize what it might have been. But the bright lights were on, and I saw it clear as day right next to me. What really fucked me up was that it had no face, no eyes, just indentations where eyes should have been, and it was blacker than anything around it, including the shadows where the driveway lights couldn't reach, meaning I still saw it as it ran outside the range of the driveway lights as a shadow, darker than the dark around it, and its legs were like fog as it ran. It was so impossible for me to comprehend, so I just stood there. It was almost like somebody cut out a humanoid shape in space, and it was just moving around like a black hole where light couldn't penetrate it. It was one of the scariest things I've seen. Eventually, the shock wore off, and I was terrified. I grabbed the bucket I had dropped, and I speed walked backwards towards the door to my mom's house because I was so scared that if I turned my back to the street and ran to the door of the house, whatever it was would come back and grab me from behind. My mother's religious, but I didn't want to make a scene since my little brother was there and he scares easily. And again, I was so shaken up. I honestly didn't understand what I had just experienced. that I just silently put the bucket away, locked the door and the door garage, and went to my room. When everyone else went to bed, I locked all of the windows and doors and closed all the blinds in the house. I was so shaken up that even my skeptical atheist ass lit some of my mom's sage and Palo Santo, and I waved the smoke around every window and every doorway in the house like I had seen her do when she'd do a house blessing. I literally was too scared to sleep. I stayed up all night Googling what it could have been, but to no avail. I was a skeptic, and it was just so hard for me to believe all the dumb articles I found that talked about aliens and ghosts. But I just couldn't find anything logical to explain what I saw. I even started to doubt myself and started questioning my sanity. Was it a hallucination? I was stone cold sober. I was in a calm and happy mood. So it wasn't a panic attack or mental break or something along those lines. No mental health issues. I had never seen anything like that before or since this event. And when it happened, I felt the air around me move as if something was physically there. Like when someone moves close to you, you can feel the air flow around you. Could it just have been some kind of gas I breathed in? I thought about how carbon monoxide poisoning in old houses can cause people to feel uneasy and hallucinate both visually and aurally. Maybe it could just be that, but we had no gas appliances anywhere in the house. Everything was electric, and I was outside in fresh summer air. Could it have really been a person, and I just didn't see them clearly? I saw it as clear as day, standing right next to me. We were both fully in the driveway, and it was literally like a foot away from me, reaching out to grab me. This thing was pitch black, and way too tall and deformed to be a human. Not even a human in a costume made sense. No human could move as fast as this thing did. And again, it was as if it absorbed all of the light that hit it. It was darker than dark. I remember when I was 16, me and my friends were out. It was me and my friend Jay and Harley. We were in this decently large park with massive grass hills surrounding it. After finishing school, we decided to go to the park, and by this time it was dark. Since it being winter, we had walked up this hill with a forest line to our right and thick grass bushes behind us. Sitting down, we could see our whole city lit up, and we were just talking, but I can't recall what about. Some point onwards, my friend Jay, who was a loud type, started whistling and shouting because of the echo you could hear. From behind us, we all heard at the same time a whistle back, the same tone and pitch, almost the same. We all looked at each other with a very confused look on our faces when my friend whistled back, and after a couple seconds, once again, we heard it, the exact same whistle from the exact same bush. I know it couldn't have been the echo because by the time whatever had repeated the whistle, the echo was gone. Now, stupidly, my friend decided to shout at it, provoking it, not knowing what it is, and this time it made my heart drop to my feet. A somewhat rough try at what he said screamed back at us, faint but very clear. At this point, Harley and I were debating leaving, but Jay said he didn't want to, so we followed him. For context, in the next part, while walking to the bushes about 200 feet to the right, was a passage of sorts that when you walked through, after about a minute led to a main road. As Jay was walking closer to the bushes, we were staying off a bit to the exit, and we were telling him that we should just go home. I know me and Harley were thinking the same thing, that we hadn't known him for that long, and a lot of what he said sounded and probably was a load of bullshit. But after this, I trusted him with my life. Jay started to say he saw and was seeing something. So I said to him, "What do you see?" And he said, like, eyes. At this point, I thought he was lying, but then between him and the bushes and the moonlit sky, I saw something dart out of the bushes at him. I thought, what the fuck? Me and Harley looked at each other and ran through the passage. Jay just started to scream. While running, I was picturing it in my head. It must have been at least 6 feet tall, and it was skinny with long limbs, but a human-sized head. When we reached the road, we looked back. I could feel my heart in my chest and the adrenaline flowing. We shouted at Jay, and after about 5 minutes, he fell to our feet out of the dark, and we sat him up and we asked him what he saw. He was confused, and after about an hour of walking, we parted ways, not talking about what just happened, in disbelief. But the next day we met up, and he was covered by black and yellow bruises. About a week ago, my fiance had told me she had heard this loud screech coming from the woods. So I was just sitting at my desk playing my PlayStation 5 when, through my headset with noise-canceling sound, I hear this screech. So obvious. I'm like, what the fuck? And then it went from a screech to a fucking dog bark within a split second. My fiance comes running out of the bedroom saying, "Did you hear that dog bark in the woods?" I said I heard something in the woods, but I don't know if it was a dog. She then proceeds to run out there into the woods with her flashlight, and I literally have to chase after her. After all that I have been through with those woods, that's a big no. So I'm not out here with her, and we hear a couple low barks, and then complete silence. Nothing. I mean, the wind even stopped. Just absolute dead silence. And I immediately got a knot in my stomach and told her, "We're going home now." So on our way out, we heard another bark. And again, it's not a normal sounding bark. We have a dog. I know all the dogs in this area. It was not a dog. Whatever it was sounded straight evil. A distorted bark was what we heard last, and as soon as we got back into our deck, the same exact barking that did the same exact sound that sounded like a dog started immediately again. I went right inside. Maybe I'm just paranoid, but the whole thing felt off. I was riding my motorcycle on a small mountain pass in western Switzerland. The night was pretty clear, thanks to the moon and the very snowy mountains who were reflecting the light. I was driving pretty fast because of the cold air was hurting my knees and fingers, and the urge to be in my warm bed, when, in a turn, just before a bridge, I saw what I think was a wounded man kneeling on the side of the road, holding his stomach. Car crashes are common on this road, so I slowed up to see if everything was okay. When the guy stood up really fast, I only saw him clearly when he crossed the road, thanks to my headlights, and it was damn creepy. It looked like a living, rotting corpse, and I only saw a glimpse of his face. It was like The only thing that came to my mind to define it is a plate of pasta and tomato sauce with meatballs. I saw it running through the field on all fours, then standing on two legs, looking at me 1 or 2 seconds, then walking away calmly into the woods. I immediately took the very small trail, the one that he exactly just came from, but I didn't see him again. Even if we have a lot of strange creatures roaming our untouched mountains of forests, I never heard about this kind of thing here. I don't know what I saw, but it was fucking scary to witness. I had a very disturbing encounter about 6 years ago, with a tall humanoid being standing about 9 feet tall in my home. It matches all the descriptions of a crawler, almost anorexic with elongated arms and fingers, but the encounter I had was strange. I remember waking up from my nap to hearing what I assumed was my boyfriend returning with food. My house has my bedroom on the basement level, and my kitchen, living room, entranceway, front door, and home bathroom is on the floor above me. There are cushioned stairs descending to my bedroom that, when walked on, make a loud tromping noise, and my boyfriend has a similar way of running down them that I always recognize. I had taken a nap while he went out to get food, when I was woken up by the loud tromping of what sounded exactly like his feet running down my stairs. Anyone with partners or kids or family members knows you can identify every person's distinct way of walking. So I get out of bed and walk to my bedroom entrance all groggy. I knock over one of the cans on my bedside table. Walking up, this is an important detail for later. My bedroom entrance faces slightly away from where the stairs end. I have 2 glass doors. I go to open them when I see a 9 feet tall being staring over my head, and I was craning my neck to look at its face. It was glowing white, yellow light emanating off of it. I remember my hallway downstairs is illuminated. Its body is skinny and pale, white, almost beige. It has no mouth, no eyes, and I don't quite remember, but are black and empty. It had outrageously long arms and fingers, and I remember being scared it would touch me with them. This is the strongest memory I have. Its arms are in a hugging position, like a parent or so who wants you to come into their arms, wide and open. Most people would scream or run or do anything but just stare silently. But this was all I felt I could do. I felt drugged almost. I crane my neck staring at it for what feels like a short time before I start getting feelings of calmness and tranquility, even care or love flowing through my mind and body. I get the urge to go back to bed and sleep. I remember being mortified once I realized that the thing in my bedroom doorway wasn't my boyfriend who had gone out to go get food. So I don't know why I just returned back to bed so calmly. It is almost like it sensed my fear, and with its outstretched arms calmed me down telepathically, almost with a stay calm and behave, it's all right message. Despite the warmth of the encounter, I still felt like I had to be respectful. This being was vastly more powerful than I was, or at least that's what it felt like it conveyed. Once I was in bed and glanced back at my doorway, I saw it had left or dematerialized. In hindsight, I remember feeling like a child obeying its parent during the encounter, even though I was 19. When my boyfriend finally got back, he woke me up and I was terrified. This time I yelled, like all the repressed fear I had from earlier manifested. I'm interested in knowing if what I saw was a crawler, or if it could have been an angel of some kind. Alien was one of my thoughts, but it was glowing, huge, and didn't have a terrifying, menacing quality to it other than when I first realized it wasn't my boyfriend. As I mentioned, I felt warm and cared for, strangely. Sleep paralysis is also possible, but wouldn't I have been paralyzed and unable to move and unable to knock over that can? Thank you everyone for listening. If your story was told, I'm glad I'm the one who could tell it. I appreciate all the love and support, and I hope you enjoyed today's stories as much as I did reading them.